on behalf of Dr. Williams and our Board of Trustees, I'd like to welcome you all to our lovely campus where we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful time. What I am going to say is, I guess it's safe to say that all of us here feel like little kids, right? I mean, who didn't want to be an astronaut, right? This is amazing. I know that my son's here. I called him, I invited him, and he wants to be an astronaut too, just like me. So I am very giddy. I'm very excited. I think we're going to have a wonderful time. I'm going to pass off the mic to our Vice President of Foundation, Jesse Turtle.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. The best campus in the whole system. I say that no matter where I am. Thank you all for being here tonight. It definitely is a thrill to welcome back our most famous alum of St. Pete College back on campus to her alma mater. So thank you so much for being here and presenting your artwork. The foundation has been a proud a proud sponsor, a proud contributor, a proud partner of the Liebner-Ratner Art Museum for the past 21 years. And I'm very happy that Christine is here as a new executive director. She's amazing. This is amazing that we can do this and bring people on campus, continue the arts, continue education, and wrap it all together between the bottom of our county all the way up to the top of our county. So it is wonderful to have you here. I want to thank everyone who has contributed to the Art Museum so far. If you have not, please see me after the event, or please see Christine. After the event, also, make sure you buy a book. So enjoy yourselves, have a good time. Thank you again for being here.
Good evening. It is so exciting to see this room filled, and we are so grateful to have you here tonight. But we have a rock star here, so it's not a big surprise. My name is Kimberly Jackson, and I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, a very long name to say ISPS. So I hope that you all have heard of us. And we are in a new relationship partnership with Christine and the museum. We have aligned on so many different issues. We've had an art program that was very successful, and we decided we can do more of this together. So we're grateful to support this endeavor, and we're just honored to have you all. SBC means a lot to the community, and when you all come, it just does our heart good to see this type of level of engagement. And I would concur. Please contribute and come back to SBC.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Rank-Carter. I am the Executive Director for the Liebner-Ratner Museum of Art. I just want to thank you all again for coming to this very, very special program. I echo what Dr. Davis had said. I don't know about you all, but I wanted to be an astronaut and an artist when I was a kid. So Nicole is fulfilling the dreams of many children, I think, around the world by being able to pursue both passions. So thank you, Nicole, for being that guiding light for so many of us. I want to thank our partners. ISPS has been wonderful, and we are so grateful for their friendship and the SPC Foundation, and of course, St. Petersburg College. And with the museum, we have a great opportunity to help people see the world through a different lens by merging the cross-disciplinary programs that St. Pete College offers, like science, technology, math, humanities, and to see that in a new creative way. And we were very excited because we've been working on this for several months now, that with Dr. Sid Martin in the engineering and technology department, who we were really trying to find a way to engage students by merging art and technology in engineering with our previous exhibition that featured Mr. Ed Hoffman, who is the architect for this building and for many projects around the college. Ed Hoffman is actually here this evening, if you want to raise your hand. So Ed Hoffman, we had this wonderful exhibition. We really wanted to engage the students who were studying architecture and design. We couldn't quite align it up for that semester last fall, but we were able to kind of hit many stones at the same time by merging science, technology, architecture, and Nicole, who fits into this story in many ways, including knowing Ed Hoffman for many years and his family, because Ed Hoffman is also one that flies planes. So we have this amazing full circle that connects many dots, and it really, at the center of it all, between the building that we're in right now that Ed Hoffman designed, his longtime friendship with Nicole Stott, and our sort of cross-disciplinary exploration between art and science, which all comes down to the next gentleman I'm about to introduce, Dr. Sid Martin.
Thank you, Christine. It's dangerous to give me a mic and stick me in front of a room. So I know that I'm not the one you want to listen to, and so I'll introduce Nicole here in a minute, but I have to tell you a little bit more about how we got here. We started talking back the summer about doing something here at the museum, and we had a kind of a little mini participation. But I really wanted to get something that our students could come to from the engineering program, which includes manufacturing, building arts, construction, and architecture. And but we also have another event that I put on with the arts department, and Jonathan Barnes and I put on a STEAM Fest. So that involves the arts, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So I wanted an artistic engineer. And so Nicole Stott was just like the perfect person. So I reached out to her and I said, we want to have this event and it's going to be on this day. And she's like, Sid, NASA sends me places. I can't be there. And so then I said, well, how about this other day for another event? And she's like, Sid, I just said I travel a lot. She wasn't saying no, and so I understood that. But I had my faculty that were saying, you know what, Sid, you just have so many events that between week 2 and 3, we can give you an evening. So I went to Nicole and I said, here's a range of dates. Can you speak on any one of those? And she said yes, and tonight, that's the night. So she was able to be here, and we have students, we have faculty, we have friends of Nicole's, we have friends of the college. There's a lot of us here to hear this evening. And so, you know, when we talk about, you know, the artistic astronaut, well, she's also, you know, there were people that were saying today, oh, Nikki, I can pick up the phone and call her anytime. I don't have to go see her speak because on Clearwater campus, people live in the area and they know her. So, you know, she's local. She went to SPC, went through an aviation management program, which I really wish we still had, and she wishes we still had it. And I wish we had an aerospace engineering program, and the state has finally recognized that that could be a high-paying job in Pinellas County, so maybe we'll have one. So we will be pursuing that. She did go to Embry-Riddle then and get her aeronautic engineering degree, which is fantastic. And then the University of Central Florida is where she studied for her master's in engineering management, which managing engineers is tough. We're a different breed, and it's even hard for us to manage ourselves. So it's great. She has a book which is on sale here. I'm 2/3 of the way through it, and I can tell you it's definitely a good read. I recommend that you purchase it. It's Back to Earth, What Life in Space Taught Me About Our Home Planet and Our Mission to Protect It. So I wanted to say I have a great team here. All the people who just spoke have supported me in some way with this event, and we've all put this on together. I just referred to them as a team, and I think Nicole Stott would tell me it was my crew. So I think I have a great crew, and with that, I'm gonna stop at this point and let Nicole talk, because that's why you're really here this evening. So Nicole?
All right, I got the, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I've got the mic up here and the computer ready to go, so I'll assume this position. But really happy to be here tonight. I love that there are, like everywhere I'm looking in this room, there's a familiar face, and that makes me very happy. And there's new faces, so hopefully we can all, I don't know, share something with each other tonight that we might not have known before. And for the people that know me and have maybe experienced this in one way or another, I apologize. You will hear some of the same things you've heard before. But it makes me very happy to be here for other reasons too. A lot of what was already been spoken about, this whole kind of full circle thing, the way it really is a small world, you know, this planet that we live on. And I mean, I'm looking across the room here, I see my friend Eddie, for sure, and Barb, and thank you. And sitting right in front of him is a gentleman named Ricky Moore, who, when it comes, I mean, there are stories I could tell you there from our well, all the way back to Plum Elementary, actually, but Clearwater High School days. But in terms of like the connection to St. Pete College, which for me at the time was St. Pete Junior College, so you can figure that one out. You know, every time I look at Ricky now, a little verklempt, I think of his dad, Lee, and oh my gosh. You know, and when I think of St. Pete Junior College, I think of Ricky's dad and how those two people, for as much as I can remember for my entire life from that point till now and everywhere in between, if I was doing an event like this, they were there. And so I look now, and Rick, as I look at you, I see your dad here sitting as well. Makes me cry and smile at the same time. And you know, there are other people. There's Ellen Markham Pope, who's sitting there. And I'm not going to take my whole time talking about all the people here. And we saw our friend Linda, who I think is where is Linda? There you are, we're right behind me. Thank you so much for coming. And Linda had an amazing husband who, I don't know if he dragged you to those places or to all these space-themed events. Linda, you seem to enjoy it, and it was always great to see you there. And so I think of George tonight too in all of this. And but I think the connections are what it's all about. I can talk to you about flying in space. I can talk to you about art. I can talk to you about my mommy and my sisters and my niece and my husband and my son who's not here, and two other dear friends who are sitting in the front row next to my sister. And because in the end, what it all comes down to, no matter what, is the people you get to share it with. And so I'll stop that rambly rant and get into this stuff, but it makes me very happy. I see some people too who take some amazing pictures off their dock in the bayou. And I just, everywhere I'm looking, I'm seeing really wonderful connections. So I said I'd stop, I'll stop. All right, you know, starting with this slide, I want to talk to you a little bit tonight about the underlying theme that was coming out of the introductions before too, this connection, this interconnection, I think, between science and art. For me, there should be no reason why these things don't blend together. And hopefully with what you'll see in the museum here, if you haven't already explored it, you'll see that intersection come to life. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. When we talk about engineering, I think the best engineers are the ones who are and need to think creatively about things. So I want to share some of the spaceflight experience stuff for sure. And then hopefully some things that'll be a little bit surprising to you about how we have since the very beginning of spaceflight, been putting the human in human spaceflight through things like art and music and creativity. And just because as humans, we want to bring our humanity with us wherever we go. Now this picture, one of my very favorites. I show this picture because it reminds me what it was like to be in space, kind of all wrapped up in one picture. It's really beautiful. As you can imagine, it is really beautiful in space, looking through the window of your spaceship. But I like it too because I look at it and it's kind of a contradiction, because you see this little spacecraft, that's the Space Shuttle Atlantis. It looks like it's just hanging there still. And it's a little silhouette, and it almost looks like there's a light on, but that's actually a reflection off of a KU band antenna, so it's not the light. But it looks like it's just hanging there still. And yet I know, with my 6 crewmates inside of that spaceship, we are traveling at 17,500 miles an hour, which is about 5 miles a second, which means we'd be from here to Clearwater Beach, 1/1000. It's pretty awesome to think about that. But because of that, it means we're also lapping the planet every 90 minutes. So about every 45 minutes or so, we get one of these stunning sunrises or sunsets out the window. 16 times a day, sunrise, sunset, every 45 minutes. And so any picture that was going to remind me of being in space would need to have one of these sunrises or sunsets in it. I also know that inside that little spaceship, like I said, I'm with my 6 crewmates. We're on our way home to our family after our successful mission. That's a nice place to be, knowing you're on your way home to your family. And I know that my crewmate, Jeff Williams, who I just spent a couple months with on the International Space Station, is very kindly looking through the window of the space station and taking this picture of us to be able to remember it. So all kind of in one picture. Now, when you talk about, I think, like the creativity of spaceflight and the artisticness and all of those kinds of words, I personally think our spaceships are really beautiful. They are like works of art. And this, to me, represents that idea so well, how as human beings, we've somehow been able to, I don't know if master is the word, but to really create awesomely complex machines to solve all different kinds of problems. And I love, again, the kind of contradiction, because anywhere in this picture that you look, and you can probably pick places out here or even on the horizon, there's a level of complexity that's almost unimaginable. And you can pick any place you want on that ginormous crawler transporter or the tip of the external tank on the space station. It's like, how did we as human beings figure out the technology, the science, all of that to create this machine that was able to get me to and from space safely, and at the same time have it look so beautiful? I mean, I think it just looks really, really beautiful. And the gentleman who took this picture is a Kennedy Space Center photographer, and I still absolutely believe it's the most beautiful image I've ever seen, especially of the shuttle stack rolling out to the launch pad. And this was the final picture of the Space Shuttle Discovery in this position as it rolled out for its final flight, STS-133, which I was blessed to have the opportunity to fly on. Now, talk about beautiful spaceships. The place that I traveled both times, to and from space, I was on the Space Shuttle. Where I went both times was the International Space Station. Absolutely a masterpiece. I will argue with anybody about you that this is a work of art in space. Again, orbiting our planet at 17,500 miles an hour, and has been in place in space in one configuration or another as it's been built up over time for, I think, 22 years now, with continuous human presence on board representing over 15 different countries, with crew members on board representing over 15 different countries, 5 international space agencies, and somehow peacefully and successfully working together there on not just the science that's happening inside of it as a laboratory, but to build it, to decide, figure out how, as different countries doing all these techie things, do we make sure when we get to space that they stick together and work. And somehow they did. And then when they didn't work, you know, we had already had the rules of engagement in place to know how to work with each other to figure out how to make it work. That's a beautiful thing. And I love that everything about the way we live and work on this mechanical life support system in space, this machine that we've built to mimic as best as we possibly can what Earth does for us naturally, all of those ways we should be working and living together down here on Spaceship Earth. It's amazing. And you know what? You can tell I'm a rambler. I could talk all night about this picture. I mean, look at this thing. When you lay this spaceship down on the ground, it's bigger than a football field. The interior volume, we live and work like in these modules, the modules that look like cans. And the interior volume is, I don't know, the equivalent of like a big 6-bedroom house. 6 or 7 crew members, you can float your separate ways and never see each other all day if you didn't want to. It's ginormous inside. And I ask you, like, think about like in this room, if you could just like gently push off your seat and float up into that top corner of up near the ceiling, and if you could utilize all of this volume of this room, how much more would be available to you? How much bigger it would feel if you were able to do that too, just effortlessly float around inside of it. Best example of living off the grid you can find. I mean, seriously, I think really today, the things that we primarily resupply to the crew members on board are things like clothes and food. We haven't got to the point where we can grow or, create our own food on board. The science equipment and things we need to replace on board. But water, electricity, the way we clean our air, how every day when we get up in the morning, we're thinking about, okay, how much CO2 is in our atmosphere? How much clean drinking water do we have? Needing to make sure we understand the integrity of our thin metal hull, and absolutely worried about the health and well-being of all of our crewmates. I mean, those are just beautiful, simple lessons for how we should be living like crew down here on Spaceship Earth. All right, I'll stop rambling about that one. So we build, what do? We build that space station, right? We build those machines in space because they have to be our life support system. That's what it's all about. It's our life support system. And we pay attention to all those things because we want these warm, fleshy ones to be able to live and work there. And we have to pay attention to those things because we can't do any science or build anything or maintain anything unless we can survive in that place. And so these are the guys over the little over 3 months that I spent on my first mission that I was there with. Normally there were 6 people on board at a time, but in this picture there's 9. And that's because we had 3 people come up before the rotating crew of 3 went home. I love this picture because to me it represents like the greatest kind of crew you can work with, right? I think the best teams, I don't know, Sid, hopefully you feel this way about the group you were talking about, is that you know you're going to enjoy yourself. You want to know you're going to have a good time, that there's personality kind of built into the people you're going to be with. But then at the same time, you want to know that when it hits the fan, because it's gonna, in one way or another, somewhere along the way, you want to know that every one of those people that there's with you is going to have your back and that they'll trust you'll have theirs. And I think that's what you see in this picture. I don't know if you can see the have your back thing, but I think you can see that we enjoyed ourselves there. And as you should. I don't know if you noticed, we all have like these red noses on. And I didn't like Photoshop that, those were real. The gentleman in the front row, second from the left, his name is Guy Laliberté, and he was the owner, founder of Cirque du Soleil. And he had, it must have been like a spare, like $50 million or so, to be one of the group of these spaceflight participants or space tourists that visited the station. He was there for like 10 days with us. He considers himself a clown, so he brought us the clown noses, and it was awesome to have him there. And you can see, I love this idea of mission too, like being part of a crew, having a mission. Guy was a guy who very much, you knew, wanted to fly to space. I mean, really and truly was excited about doing that. But aside from Cirque du Soleil, he has a foundation called One Drop, which is all about educating about clean drinking water around the world, and not just educating about it, but finding ways to provide it to places that never had clean drinking water before. So his One Drop Foundation was what he kind of focused his whole mission on, and did a really wonderful job sharing that with a large amount of people on the ground. And talking about One Drop, this is a picture, I think, that speaks to why we even go to this place, right? Why do we go and live and work on an International Space Station that's circling the Earth 16 times a day, and where all the crew members and everything else up there is floating? It's because we can take gravity out of the equation. We can look at things from a whole new perspective and learn things about them that we never would have even maybe imagined. You know, things that we thought we knew a whole lot about. And by taking gravity out of the equation, it lets us look at it in a whole new way. And I love, Christine, what you said about just even the museum opening up this opportunity for people to have new perspectives on things. And that is one of the greatest gifts from getting to go to space, and to be lifted off the planet a little bit more than the airplanes we used to fly out of Clearwater Air Park down the road, but to see, you know, again, see things in a whole new way. It's amazing what comes from that. And everything does behave differently. Our bodies behave differently because we're floating. The water behaves differently. One of the most difficult things about being in space is keeping track of your stuff. And yeah, well, I'm not a very organized person down here on Earth, but you absolutely have to be one when you're floating on a space station. Now, I'm going to shift now because I want to talk about this perspective thing again, too. This inspiration that comes from it, this kind of awe and wonder that I told Chris, my husband, you know, very early in the flight, you know, one of the first days, I'm like, I don't know how to describe this. I'm not sure what it is I'm really experiencing when I'm looking out the window, when I'm floating. What is it? And he goes, I'm thinking, you know, you're using the word awesome a lot. I'm thinking you might have a better understanding of what the word awe means. And I think that's true. There's something really awesome and wonderful about being in a special place like this, having this vantage point. And one of the absolutely best vantage points that you could have on the International Space Station was this module called the cupola. And it's basically an Earth-facing bay window. You can fit, you know, from a work standpoint, there's a bunch of computers in there and these monitors and hand controllers. And we fly the robotic arm, that big white crane that's on the side of the space station that we use to move people and hardware and stuff around on the outside. All of our controllers, a lot like a big video game, quite honestly, are in that module. So you do have to work in there sometimes too, but it is the most amazing observatory. And it faces towards Earth. It's got this big circular window in the middle and then 6 windows around it. And I'm pretty sure whoever designed it was thinking about it from kind of the operational standpoint, the design of, okay, I need crew members to be able to look down the station here. I need them to be able to see the robotic arm when they're doing this. But it is an amazingly just wonderful place to be. And the Earth just opens up around you, and there is no denying when you look through this window, actually when you look through any of the windows from your spaceship, that you live on a planet. And that to me was one of the revelations that came from flying in space, that when I say it out loud, I'm sometimes like, man, people are gonna think, how does she not know we live on a planet, you know? We all learned that in kindergarten. But that reality check of it in your face is pretty impressive. And it has planted in my brain and my mind in a way that every day I wake up in the morning, I'm like, hey, I live on a planet. I'm walking on a planet. I'm, you know, gardening in the backyard on a planet, you know, where in reality, what just feels like this place that we are meant to be, because it is perfectly designed for us, perfect distance from the sun, you know, a little closer, a little further, not so good for us. And we don't even realize that we're on this planet that is spinning at like 1,000 miles an hour and is orbiting the sun at like, I can never remember, it's 30,000 or 60,000 miles an hour. Both of those numbers are big, but we don't feel that. We just feel like we're meant to be here, and we are. And so don't forget you live on a planet. That'll be one of my things that I want to leave you with tonight. And this is a picture. It's a little hard to see the horizon of it at the top, but oh my gosh, to be able to see Florida from space, you know, I think it's like anything. It's like when I got here tonight, I'm looking through the window. Is Sid in there? Is Christine in there? You know, you're looking for the familiar, right? You want to find that first. And the same thing happened when I got to space. I knew, oh man, I want to get to the window. I want to see something familiar. And that was the place I was looking for. And there is no denying Florida from space. Doesn't matter if you're just floating up in the window, any way, you're going to know if you're flying over Florida, day or night, actually. And it's just stunning. Equally as beautiful from that vantage point as it is with our feet right down here on it. And looking through the window, I found there was kind of an evolution to it. You know, I wanted to see Florida. I wanted to see my spaceship, you know, through the window, get to know it a little better that way. I wanted to see, you know, when spacewalks were going on, my crewmates crawling around out there and be able to keep track of them. I wanted to get to know the geography of Earth better. You know, I was never a very good geography student, but now I feel like I know the Earth. And as crewmates, we would challenge each other like, okay, you know, we're gonna just look out the window and we're gonna, okay, is that a desert in Africa or Australia? And just from the patterns and the textures and the colors, you could get to the point where you're like, okay, that's Africa. And then you go look at the computer and you'd be like, yeah, you know, that's Africa. And it was really cool to have that happen. And so there's the familiar, the geography, the knowing where places are without, you know, looking at the computer. And then there was just the, wow. Every single time there was a surprise out the window. Didn't matter if you were flying over the same place again. It was always beautiful. It was always like glowing and colorful and translucent and iridescent and all those words you would describe paint with, I guess. But that's what it looked like out the window. And it was surprising, and it just got to the point where I didn't care where it was on our Earth I was looking at. I was just looking for that new surprise. And to me, Earth became a work of art. Like it was like the work of art out the window that you knew was always going to be there, and it was always going to surprise you. And there were things like this tiny little heart-shaped island in the Red Sea, part of this Dahul archipelago, that is a naturally shaped heart island. Now I had probably a 800 millimeter lens on. And for the photographer in the room, or photographers in the room, can you imagine having an 800 millimeter lens on your camera right now? You know, but up there it doesn't weigh anything. So you're like, I can use the 800 millimeter lens. I can really, you know, zoom in. It doesn't weigh anything. And so it's amazing the kind of, just the ways you can look through the window too, with your naked eye or with a big wide angle lens or a big zoom lens, and what you can pick out of what's on the planet. And this beautiful heart-shaped island that when I looked at it, when I was looking at it through the window, and when I see it in the picture now, I'm like, oh my gosh, God must have a really wonderful sense of humor. Whether you believe in him or not. But I mean, because everywhere you looked, there was something like this to discover. A little naturally heart-shaped island, or there were atolls, like through the Pacific. It literally looked like footprints on the ocean. Or if you floated and looked at the Amazon River just right, it looked like an elephant with its trunk up. I mean, and you just started like to see these things, and it was really neat to, and when I go back and look at pictures now, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? That looks like a, you know, it looks like a seahorse in one of the, you know, Galapagos Islands is like shaped like a seahorse. I didn't even notice it when I was looking through the window, but really cool to see that kind of thing. My very favorite picture that I took from space is this one. Again, a tiny little chain of islands. This one is on the northern coast of Venezuela. It's called Las Rocas. And I just remember floating in front of the window, seeing this, getting ready to take a picture of it, and thinking, oh my gosh, it looks like somebody had reached down with their hand with it like a ginormous paintbrush and painted a wave on the ocean. And this one picture has was in space and has become a really, you know, very inspirational to me in terms of my own artwork. I was fortunate to be able to paint in space, painted with watercolors, which if you think back to that picture with the floating ball of water on the end of the straw, it's an interesting kind of thing to paint with watercolors in space, but not more difficult, just different. And that's what everything was like up there, whether it's going to the bathroom or painting or flying a robotic arm or just moving from one place to another. Not more difficult, just different. and dipping a brush into floating balls of water and dragging that colored water along the paper. And of course, you know, as I mentioned, at 5 miles a second, you're not really going to float in front of the window and paint what you're seeing out the window, because what you're seeing out the window is going to be gone probably before you can even get the brush to the paper. So I printed out on scrap paper the picture and just would work a little bit every night on the painting. And you can see my paints are stuck up on the wall over on the side. Velcro is your friend in organization in space, and would squirt out a little ball of water to dip the brush in. It was absolutely one of my the personal highlights of being in space. And I wanted to just tell you that I mean, I painted in space, but man, the art and the music has been going on since the very beginning of human spaceflight. And I think it's surprising to people, especially when we're talking, you know, trying to encourage this connection between science and art and how they really play so well together. And a lot of people, and I know when I talk to kids, and we've done some exhibits where we try to focus on this, they'll say to their mom when they're looking at some of the things, they'll be like, I didn't know you could do science and art, or art and science, you know, like it's a law that you can't do those two things or something. But I can tell you, most of the people that I worked with, whether they were in mission control, or they were engineers, or they were the people training me to go to space, or they were my colleagues flying in space, have some kind of creative thing going on that it might not be out in the open all the time, but it's there. And this gentleman is Alexei Leonov. He was one of the very first cosmonauts. He actually wanted to be an artist, but somehow the path had to be military guy, astronaut, then you get to be an artist kind of thing. But he purposefully, on his very first flight, one of the very first flights in space, human flights in space, took up colored pencils with him and was very thoughtful about it. You see, he like had a little loop on it because he knew it was going to be floating, so the pencils are on there. Every pencil had a string on it. And he did very rudimentary stuff while he was there, but they were the inspiration for these amazing paintings that he did after he got home. And then he was the commander on the Soyuz side of that very iconic, historic, very meaningful, I think, too, Apollo-Soyuz mission, where we had a Soviet Soyuz spacecraft dock with an Apollo, U.S. Apollo spacecraft in space. They opened the hatches, they shook hands, they spent, can't remember, a few days together orbiting the planet, and they had trained together before going to space. I think it's one of the very early kind of things that put us in a place to do an International Space Station the way we are now, and how those relationships can develop, even with the things going on in the world today. But the picture you see in his hand, when they did that mission, he did like charcoal portraits of all of the crewmates on the mission. And that happens to be a portrait of Tom Stafford, who was the commander on the US side. And those two men, I think from the time they met, were best friends. And up until when Alexei passed away a few years ago, and Tom still has that portrait over his fireplace in his house. Music in space, all right, kind of jumping ahead, but this is a little jam session on the space station. On board the space station, there's at least one guitar. I think there's probably two, because I don't think anybody's gonna pay to bring it back. So guitars, you got somebody playing a little flute up there. My friend Katie brought up like 3 flutes and played them on board station. I think that's a pan flute over there that Oleg has. And Ricky Arnold, very talented, little bongo action on the solid waste container, which hopefully is empty. Although you might get different sounds by having different levels of containment. And then, I mean, just really creative stuff going on. Our friend Don Pettit, one of the most creative people I've ever seen with photography. He did, on his first flight, before we had the really high-speed cameras that could capture the light pretty good. I mean, I joke with the people up there now that they can just point the camera out the window and they just take pictures. They're not even having to track or anything. But when Don flew the first time, they didn't have it. So he rigged like a Makita drill to be the camera tracker for, with Earth, and was doing things, and then evolved into things like these star trail images, which I think are so cool. So time-lapse stuff that he compiles to have this really beautiful artistic imagery. I think music goes to extremes in some ways, and God bless that crew, man. Here's Kjell Lindgren with the bagpipes in space. He was able to get this really compact set of bagpipes from the Scottish military, I think, and field bagpipes, and brought them up with him. And he was going to play, but I don't know, just the human connection thing came into it again. He was just planning on playing while he was there, and messing with his crewmates, I guess. But it ended up being a really important thing for him, this really human connection thing, because while he was there, one of his close family friends passed away down here on Earth. And I get goosebumps thinking about it. So Kjell played Amazing Grace from the space station, was able to time it, I don't know how, to play for their friend's service down here on the ground. And I think you can actually, if you go Google it, I think there's a way to say, bagpipes on the space station, and I think there's a video of him playing. You've got other people painting, more Jackson Pollocky. That's Richard Garrett up there in the top right. He built a little plastic box and stuck paper on the wall and then splattered acrylic paints all over it and let it just do. It's almost like the microgravity painted for him, right? And then my friend Karen Nyberg, who recently retired, go check out Karen. I mean, and especially if you're a textile person, if you like quilting or sewing, she is amazing. She quilted in space. She can play the piano, she can draw, she can paint, she can quilt. And she's come up with her own line of quilting fabrics that are based on the pictures she took of Earth from space. So all these patterns, and she's even putting out patterns for people to, do based on the kinds of things she's doing. But she sewed and quilted while she was in space. She even built or sewed together a little stuffed dinosaur for her son, who was really little at the time when she flew. This is my friend Alan Bean. Alan was on Apollo 12. He was the fourth person to walk on the moon. And when he retired from NASA, he went full-time artist. And one of the most incredible artists you will ever see. He painted based on, his experience on the moon, in space, and of other crew members' experience there. Very much an engineer about his art. He had his kind of creative flair where he would add little pieces of string that were from a patch that he had on the moon that had moon dust in them. So he would embed those in his paintings. He would use these training boots that they had for the moon missions, and he would make imprints of the boots on the paintings. And he was very much a lover of Monet, and so the colors are not necessarily realistic to what the moon was, but that was his kind of creative license there. But otherwise, that man, when you went into his studio, if he was painting something, there was a picture of it, what it was going to be, the same size and everything, next to it with grid lines on it. And he had tables all leveled out with the lighting just right, with mock-ups of the moon lander or it would be it's like a kid's playground. These little miniature astronauts all in the different configurations and stuff, so that it would look as much as it could from a technical side what it was on the moon. Amazing man. One of my very favorite mentors. And then just a selection of some others. You've got Michael Collins, Apollo 11. His friends Buzz and Neil were walking around on the moon while he was circling it, waiting to pick them up. Incredible artist. He'd painted his whole life. He considered himself kind of a childish painter, I guess. He never really took lessons. He'd read books and stuff, but he painted mostly natural scenes, things in Florida and stuff. But people would always ask him, well, where's the space, the space pictures, where are your space paintings? So he did one, and he calls it the Snook 1 launch. So, it's got a launch pad there and a launch kind of thing, but it's a fish, flying to space, because he wanted it, to still be a nature photo. Dear friend, Al Warden, Apollo 15, he was the guy circling the moon again. Maybe there's a trend here with that. A poet. He wrote a book called Hello Earth after his Apollo 15 mission, which is just a selection of poems talking about what training was like and what circling the moon was like and what doing the farthest deep space all by yourself spacewalk was like, and being, you know, around the moon, all of that. And his way to share it was through poetry. Really incredible guy. And then somebody who was not an astronaut, I don't know if you can see, I'm probably standing right in front of Robert's head here, but Robert Goddard, the father of American rocketry, right? The guy who, you know, designed all the stuff that helped get us off the planet, was a painter. And I never knew that, discovered it just a couple years ago. And the way he would go off and think, I guess, was he'd go off into the, you know, into the New Mexico landscape and paint. And I mean, I think that's so awesome to know that. And that painting in space, like I said, that wave picture, definitely inspiration for me. It was the inspiration for what I painted while I was in space, but it's led to what I really believe is like my next mission in life, the one that I'm on right now, which evolved from wanting to use my own artwork to share the spaceflight experience and remind people how everything we're doing in space is ultimately about improving life on Earth. Remind people, you know, through my art, whether you like my art or not, that we live on this planetary spaceship and we really do need to be behaving like crewmates and not passengers. I thought art is this universal communicator, why not use it? And while I was pursuing that on my own with my own art, which I still every now and then have time to do, but I came across some folks who are working with kids in pediatric cancer centers. We started with one hospital in Houston, and we've grown to in creating things like these beautiful art spacesuits out of the kids' artwork. And that's grown to working with kids. Our last project had art from at least one child in 192 countries on Earth. And I think that's pretty much all of them. There's a few more nation state kinds of things, but that was amazing that during the plague, as my husband refers to it, we were able to reach out and connect with these kids around the world to collect that artwork. And the name of the group is the Space for Art Foundation. I just want to show you, let's see, I don't know if it's playing. Let me hit play. And hopefully there's no audio because you don't want to hear the music on this thing. It's just a couple of the suits that we did. You can see we're, you know, around the world, painting with kids in all of the International Space Station countries, and you know, now far and wide, collecting their artwork that then gets assembled by, I will say, the spacesuit company, ILC Dover, the same company that made the suits that walked on the moon, that made the suit I got to do my spacewalk in, have volunteered with us since the beginning. They quilt the suits together. A couple of them, as you can see, have had the chance to fly to the space station. That's our friend Jack Fisher wearing the suit. The kids in mission control and around the world getting to experience it up there. And then that's Peggy Whitson wearing the suit and flying through the sky. It's just incredible, really awesome. And so our mission, let's see, uniting a planetary community of children through the awe and wonder of space exploration and the healing power of art. And in everything we're doing, we're reminding them of what I hope you'll leave with tonight too, this idea that everything we're doing off the Earth is for the Earth, and this responsibility that we have to behave like crewmates and not passengers. And this is just a quick one to say, maybe someday our spacesuits will look like this. That's what we dream of, that at Space for Art Foundation. Although there are technical reasons why they're white. You know, there's this thermal stuff and all of that. But we're trying to convince them that, hey, maybe those little wristbands that we use, can't we make those whatever color we want them, or the patches we have, you know, try to figure out how to gradually be customizing to something that might be a little more creative. But, all right, I'm gonna wrap up now with a couple slides here just to say, I don't know, I looked for Florida from space. I looked for that familiar, you know, the beauty in what we see in Florida. Florida's in this picture too. You can see coming in from the right side of the view. And I don't know, I look at this and I'm like, there is no denying that we live on a planet when you look at something like this. And how this place like Florida that I consider to be my home becomes part of this, you know, is a special place that's part of a planet that's our home. And I love that the pictures can remind us of that. I like thinking about, all right, this is a really dark picture, and I don't know if oh, yep, I see it. So this is a picture on Mars. that's looking back at Earth. And if there's a tiny little dot of light on the shot there, that's Earth. And I mean, think about it, in a few years, I mean, it's not going to be far off, I'm hoping in my lifetime, where people are going to be on their way to Mars in a relatively small spaceship. It's not going to be the Martian movie, rotating, ginormous Hollywood spaceship. It's not going to be that right away. And, they're going to be this relatively confined space. And at some point in their 6 to 8 month, that's the best estimate right now, to get to Mars travels, they're going to cross a line in space where Earth doesn't look like Earth out the window anymore, where they're not going to see that blue, green, white, Earth in all its colors we know Earth to be, art out the window. They're going to see a dot of light. And so I have to believe that all this stuff we're doing with kids in the hospital and that we're thinking about in terms of how do you, lift a child up who's going through the worst thing that you hope they ever have to go through in their entire life, and kind of watch them transcend that and think about their future and imagine, we're going to need to do the same thing for our astronauts in these tiny little spaceships. And I think this is one of the pictures that really reminds us of that kind of thing. I mean, the farthest we've gone now has been the moon. We're going back. Thank you very much. Going back to the moon with some people. And, the goal is to have a permanent presence there and settle there permanently with, the ability to travel further off the planet too and do all these things that are coming back to Earth. But that's 250,000 miles-ish away to the moon. Mars, at its closest, is like 35 million miles away. So a little bit different trip. All right, so I leave you with, and I hope you will read the book, even if you don't buy it tonight, I hope you will at some point read it. It does share the underlying lessons that I learned, which will seem so obvious, that, we live on a planet. We are all Earthlings. And the only border that matters is that thin blue line of atmosphere that blankets and protects us all. And that by behaving like crewmates and not passengers, we absolutely have the power to create a future for all life on Earth that's as beautiful as it looks from space. And no presentation at St. Pete College would be complete without a picture of, that was one of the greatest things too about going to space, was reconnecting with people. And finding ways to share the experience as much as you can in the tiny little bag of stuff you get to carry with you. To be able to take something like this and, and then share it coming back. I think the school has it somewhere. And then today is a day that in NASA history is a really sad one. But we celebrate these people. Today is the 20th anniversary. I cannot believe it's been 20 years. Of the Space Shuttle Columbia accident. And this is the STS-107 crew, just really awesome human beings, Earthlings, astronauts. And so I love to see this picture of them smiling, because they were loving their time in space. But I think it's good for us to remember them too. And we were at a memorial service on Sunday, which was for kind of this time of year is when we honor all 3 of the major accidents we had in the space program. The Apollo 1 fire, which was 56 years ago, a couple days ago. The Challenger accident, which was 37 years ago. How is that? And then Columbia. And I had the chance to share a couple words there, and there was this Jewish phrase saying that discovered recently through a documentary that a friend has made. And it says, it's something like, may their memory be for a blessing. And it's kind of a weird little jumble of words, but it's so perfect because their lives were important. It's important for us to remember them that way. And it's important for us to remember that they lived their lives well, and whether they're here with us or not, whether Lee is here with us or not, that they were important, and we are thankful to be able to carry on their mission. So thank you very much. I know I rambled. We'll go back to that one. And I rambled on, so I don't know if I used all of your Q&A time, but I'm happy to take some if you have them.
I think we definitely have time for some questions and answers. And what we're going to ask is that if you have a question, that you make it to somebody who has a microphone so that you can ask, because we do have the people who are online right now and they would appreciate hearing your question and not have you shouting what it might be. So does anybody have a question? There's a question here.
I didn't have to do the usual Bueller. Anyone?
Yeah.
Great reason.
Hello?
I can hear you repeat it.
But, oh, okay.
Great presentation. There we go. You mentioned that the mission to Mars is going to be much longer. Never anything like this has been attempted. What is medicine telling us about preparing someone for being weightless and loss of body mass and all that kind of thing for over a year, it sounds like?
Yeah, I mean, the trip to Mars right now, I don't see anything indicating that we're going to be spinning up a spacecraft for like artificial gravity to be loading our bodies up that way. I think what we've learned on the International Space Station in the months and close to a year time frame that people have been spending in microgravity there is that you absolutely have to have the countermeasures to that bone and muscle loss. And we have very effective tools on board the space station, resistive exercise devices, which sounds a little counterintuitive to be able to lift weights in space, but they have this amazing machine that allows you to do all the major muscle group exercises. And we've got a cycle ergometer, that you strap your feet in and ride your bike standing up, with a load on it, and a treadmill that you strap yourself down to. And then all the food and the vitamin D and these other things that we're doing while we're there are meant to be the countermeasures to that kind of physiological side of it. But going to Mars, I mean, we are going to be, there's some people in this room that might actually get to do it. It's going to be a small spacecraft. And so right now they're struggling with how do you have like an exercise protocol that will be effective? How do you supplement in some way that's not going to cause, pharmaceutically even, that's not going to cause other issues when you come back to gravity, by causing different kind of iterations to the way your bone develops and all that kind of stuff. So that's one of the major things right now is kind of the human in the loop on this whole humans to Mars mission. And there's the radiation side of it. There's the, when we think about food, right? On the space station right now, I mentioned one of the things we resupply pretty regularly are boxes of food. And all of it's packaged in a way that it's just like a lot of stuff, and you've got to have the place to store it and prepare it. And on this little spaceship, food is going to have to be revolutionized. It's not just going to be how do we pack it in a bag that looks like camping food. It's going to have to be, is it the little pill that we add water to, or the sponge, or something, because there's going to be no place to store it on board. And the spaceship that you travel to Mars in is not going to be one where you're going to be growing, have a whole farm going on inside of the thing, at least not initially. So a lot to overcome in that to and from Mars, which is probably about, a year and a half's worth of the trip of the at minimum of a 3-year time frame, because the planets all have to align properly to be close enough for us to either go there or come home too. So it's an interesting problem. And the especially interesting thing about part of it to me is that somehow all of those human things tend to get put down lower than how do we make the rocket go? So, I mean, we've seen it on every program. On the space station, it would have been a much different looking place if we had the habitation module and the stowage modules and that kind of thing. But when you start cutting costs, it's like, okay, your toilet's going to be in your laboratory and you're going to live in where the food is and, stuff like that, which works, but it's not putting the human at the top of the list for that kind of thing.
We have a virtual question and then we'll grab yours. virtually you were asked, if not too personal, how was your physical health affected by staying in space?
Overall, I mean, I think everybody is impacted in one way or another. The bone loss, muscle loss is certainly something, but we on the space station fortunately have a way to counteract that. So if you do the 2 hours of exercise a day that they schedule for you, which is a mix of aerobic and resistive exercise, which I did. I mean, I actually came back in physically, like strength-wise, in better shape than I was before I flew, because who has 2 hours a day to exercise? It was awesome. But so we found ways to counteract, for the most part, that bone loss. What we don't really understand yet is if the structure of the bone has changed. So the density might come back and look good, but the quality of bone might be different. And that's something we can't really study very closely. For the doctors in the room, they'll know, while we're still alive, because the kind of sampling you have to do wouldn't be very nice. So we have a lot to learn when it comes to that. There's a lot going on. You may have heard about the studies on our eyes. A lot of people have had, and I didn't have this, although I think I was right at the perfect time on my second flight where I couldn't extend my arm far enough to see the watch anymore. But I don't think that was spaceflight related. But a lot of people are having impact on their eyes because when you get to space in that microgravity environment, all of your fluids in your body kind of shift up towards your head. And so you'll see people, like I loved it because, and for the dermatologists in the room too, it was like it took 10 years off you. Like the fluid shifted up, it filled out all the lines. You got this really amazing lift out of that shift. It was awesome. It's like 10 years when, like right there. But when that happens, and some people, it happens more extensively to some people than others, where you'll look at people and you're like, oh my gosh, why are they so puffy up there? And it's the fluid shift, but that's not just like physically you seeing it in your face, it's like pressure on the back of your eyes as well. So this intracranial pressure thing is going on. And so people have had pretty extensive vision impairment while they're in space, like changing glasses 3 times while they're on a 3 to 6 month mission. And some of that not recovering when they come back. So that's another big one for on the way to Mars. You don't want to be blind when you get to Mars because of all this, this pressure that you're experiencing on the back of your eyes. So there's a lot being studied on that. I'm going to throw out one little tidbit on that though. And my husband loves it, but I'm not going to share why he thinks the reason why is. Although maybe I will. It's mostly adults in the room. No, it's only been, in all of what they've seen of the eye, the impact on the vision, it's only been men. Women have not been experiencing this, and which is interesting, for a number of reasons. And my husband can share with you why he thinks, and what your grandmother would have told you why that might happen. All right.
We had
Sid, we have a question over here.
Hello, ma'am. My name's Aaron Haney. I'm retired U.S. Navy. And
Thank you.
No problem. And my question is about...
Not for retiring, but for what you...
I'm just dad now.
Okay.
Recovering the Orion in USS Portland, LPD-27. The last thing I got to do in the Navy was work with the chief warrant officer that was rewriting the wet well manual, which is the recovery of anything inside of the amphibious back end of a ship. Is the NASA going to start working with the Navy to streamline this across all amphib platforms, or just on the ship that goes, oh, you two are task force, so we're going to ramrod you through the training with a dummy capsule? Because that doesn't work good. Because I know during the Apollo mission, it was very streamlined, and they could basically put any aircraft carrier out there, and it was a very streamlined program. Right now, it doesn't seem to be that way at all.
Yeah, and thanks for the question. So what he's referring to is the recovery ship for our new moon rocket, for the capsule that comes back, is one that has something called a well deck in it. So the whole, like inside of the ship, and I know I'm going to oversimplify, it opens up, and then they flood it with, whatever you're bringing in gets dragged into this well deck, and then they flood it with, they drain the water out of it after you have dragged the capsule in, and then they can access the capsule and the crew. There was a lot of protest to that. And I was one of those people who went on the test mission for that, and I watched them hooking up lines to the capsule and taking 4 hours, first of all, to drag the capsule back into the well deck. And then it taking what would have been a minimum of an hour to drain the water, and all of that time, the expectation that the crew was still going to be in the capsule. Now, you've just come back from the moon, right? You've just survived this re-entry into the atmosphere, with your capsule burning up around you, and you've splashed down in the ocean. You've survived all that. Nothing happened to the capsule that's gonna, at that point where, you're in another emergent condition. But, oh my gosh, now they're gonna strap lines on this and drag you for 4 hours back into the well deck, where you're laying on your back. Even on a calm sea, it's not going to be a good day. And you can see the divers out there in their rafts and stuff outside, and you're like, why aren't you just opening this up and letting me out? And imagine now, you're not going to feel good, right? And they're telling you can't open your visor on your helmet because there might be a toxic atmosphere. And so you got to keep that closed, and you got a neck dam up around that's kept your body sealed in the suit, and you're starting to feel sick. And now imagine getting sick in that helmet while you're laying on your back with your helmet closed. It's just not, and thankfully, I will say, now they just have to worry about the capsule, because we convinced them, and it was funny, my husband too, he knows all the inside. We brought back videos from that training run, and I think I showed a minute-long video in one of the senior management meetings, the people that decide, of the capsule kind of bobbing around in the water. And people were getting nauseous just watching the capsule bob around in the water. And you could see they're imagining themselves laying on their backs and figured out that was not the right decision. They're still gonna drag the capsule back into the well deck, at least as far as I know. It seems like what they did with with this recent recovery of the Artemis 1 mission, that it all went okay. But I think it's not a long-term solution that we should be looking at. I know, I'm sorry, you guys, I can never answer a question with a short answer. Yeah. Yeah. And there's about 80 people in the wing wall. It's just... Oh yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy time. But I'm so thankful they aren't dragging the people back in it anymore.
Christine, do we have time for another question?
We have a couple questions actually right here in this corner, and then I'm thinking, we're running short on time. We do have a raffle, which I know you guys are super excited about, that we've got some prizes for you, and we really want to get to the book signing so you can actually, meet Nicole. But if we could do a couple, we have two guys right here. Okay, we'll.
Oh, you think so?
You're close. I'm going to give this to you.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Wayne. I'm a radiation oncologist. So I'm going to ask a question about mission to Mars and the radiation issue.
Maybe you can answer it better than I can.
The challenge, last time we went to the moon, astronauts were describing, even with their eye closed, seeing lights because of heavy particle hitting their retina. But that's 7 days to the moon. Going to Mars is like a year and a half. The problem, if you put too much shielding to protect them from radiation, especially heavy particle, the rock is too heavy to go. And if you don't put enough shielding, obviously they will be exposed to dangerous radiation. Any advancement in that to solve that challenging problem?
I'm sure there are that I probably don't know about. The one thing, even on the space station in low Earth orbit, what are we, about 200 to 300 miles above Earth, which is not really that far in the grand. We're just going around it fast and a lot. People experience those little flashes even in low Earth orbit on the space station. The thing I think that is primarily being considered right now is that we're going to have to take and create water, no matter what, right, when we're traveling to Mars. And so the water that we take, they're talking about using that to line the interior walls. Because I guess, and you can tell me better, water, I guess, is a really great barrier. And so even on the space station, in my crew compartment, I would put water bags up the side, that I knew was the hull side of the crew compartment, because it's supposed to be protective. They're of course always looking at new materials for the exterior of the spacecraft, but I think it's going to end up being something like water, or I mentioned that solid waste container, and they're having to figure out how to manage waste on board longer expeditions like this. And some of it might actually be, making, and I hate to, it's really kind of gross, like dehydrating our solid waste into a way that you can create bricks and lining out of that as well. And it wouldn't be the most, but you think about it now, we used to get so much grief about on orbit, the way we create clean drinking water right now is primarily out of our wastewater, including the wastewater that comes out of us. And it's incredible how clean a water, and even tasty, that you can create from that. But everybody was freaking out at first, like, oh my gosh, it's one thing to drink your own, but knowing it's just going to be a mix of your crewmates too, and there's a really great, you can go check it out on the interweb as well. There's a really great spoofy thing on the testing of the water generation system. But it's a big deal. It's the human in the human spaceflight again. Yeah.
Well, you have convinced me. If it's tasty, I'm down for that. I'm going to give this gentleman this microphone. And
very patient.
Probably don't need it because I have a loud voice. So this was from my students. I'm assuming that you have a weight limit on how much stuff you can take with you?
Yeah, I mean the whatever rocket or capsule is flying, or like the shuttle, had a load limit as well. For what you can launch and get to where you want it to go. For me personally, they didn't complain about how much I weighed, so that was good. But I was allowed to bring some personal items, right? But it had to, and it was in the size of a small duffel bag, not even a duffel, like a big toiletry bag or something, to take personal stuff.
I'm assuming you don't have a library up there except for basically electronic books and things like that. How do you prioritize what you
There are some books up there. From the personal item side, they don't restrict what you bring as long as that bag doesn't weigh more than a certain, I can't remember what the number was. No, yeah, right. And the materials had to be okay. Like those paints that I brought, one of the reasons I went with watercolors was because it was the least toxic, it was going to be the easiest to clean up. There was nothing in it that the system that cleans our air couldn't clean out. So everything is scrutinized that way, in addition to weight. But most of the stuff that came up for me was packed by NASA or our flight crew equipment people that said, okay, Nicole, you get 1 pair of khaki pants for the 3 months you're in space. You get, 7 pairs of underwear, it's more than that, but they had that whole allotment worked out and how you're supposed to cycle through that stuff. So they know what the weight on that kind of thing is. But all the cargo vehicles and the crew vehicles have limitations for, total weight that can go. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions, but I do want to let you know there's actually another great event that Nicole will be at that I'll just mention quickly with Brooker Creek Preserve, February 25th. We actually have flyers on the table as you go up the stairs out there, but she will be doing a book signing and a talk there, which I'm going to be there, so I expect you all to be there. But it's a great opportunity to, if you don't get to talk to her this evening,